Good morning. It is good to be here with each of you this morning. Appreciate the song service, Leslie. Just the beautiful lyrics. This world is not our home. And also the other song, Shout to the Lord, nothing compares to the promise that we have in God. I don't know if, some of you may be having a bad week. Some of you may have had a really good week. But either way, nothing that we face here on earth compares to the promise that we have in God and in our salvation one day. So what a blessing that is this morning. So, all right. So as I was driving in my car, coming home from work earlier in the week, there was a song that came up on the radio. So I listened to 99.1 Joy FM. And the words of the song that came up really stuck with me. It came from a song called You've Already Won by Shane and Shane. Shane, if you're listening, I don't know if Shane Hines was the one who sang that or not. We'll have to ask him next week maybe. But either way, these words really stood out to me in the chorus of the song that said, I'm fighting a battle you've already won, you being God. Of course, we're fighting a battle that God already won. So how many times do we find ourselves in our lives worrying about different things? Sometimes it could be big things, uncertainty about our jobs, about our homes, financing, things like that. It could be littler things like having a conversation with someone, being nervous about a conversation, or maybe if you're in school, a presentation or a project or something like that. But we find ourselves worrying a lot, don't we? We let our uncertainty consume our lives. Every day is filled with fears and doubts, and yet we're still here. So why is it that we worry? Sorry, wrong way. Okay, so I'd like to spend most of the time this morning. We'll be in Exodus 4, but we're going to do a little summary for context here from Exodus 3 as you're opening your Bibles to Exodus 4. We see in Exodus 3 that God speaks to Moses through a burning bush. God hears Israel's cry for help and chooses Moses to lead Israel out from Egyptian oppression. And then God reveals himself as I am, and I am who I am. And God tells Moses how Israel will be delivered, or reveals how Israel will be delivered through Moses from Egypt. And so, like I said, I want to mainly read through Exodus chapter 4 this morning. We'll start in chapter 4, verses 1. Exodus chapter 4, verses 1. Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, The Lord did not appear to you. The Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? He said, A staff. And he said, Throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, Put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Again the Lord said to him, Put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, leprous like snow. Then God said, Put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you've spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall speak. But he said, O my Lord, please send someone else. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is there not Aaron your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. So kind of like the cliche statement, hindsight is 20/20. It's easy for me to almost just like want to time travel back in time, kind of grab Moses by the collar and shake him a little bit and be like, what are you doing? Because Moses kind of sounds a little bit foolish, especially when we're able to look back and see that God delivered Israel and delivered Moses just like he said he would. But as we read through the story, Moses honestly really sounds a lot like me as I was reflecting on it more and more. God shows Moses all these signs that we just read in Exodus 4 to prove that God is who he says he is. God also shows Moses that God has power over Moses' fears. Moses' staff became a serpent, and Moses ran from it, as we just read in verse 3. But God helped Moses overpower his fear by turning the serpent back into a staff. We also saw that Moses' hand became leprous and then came back to normal. But even after these signs, Moses' fear came up that he won't be able to speak. But God reminds Moses that he was the one who made his mouth. And even still, Moses begs God, please send someone else. And so, in frustration, God chooses Aaron, the brother of Moses, to do the speaking for him. So as we look through this story, we see that God gave Moses a huge task. There's no denying that. To lead a group of people out from a strong world power in Egypt under a Pharaoh who had a hard heart, that was not an easy task. But I don't want to overlook Exodus 4:3, as I just mentioned. We can read it again. It's on the screen. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. Clearly, Moses doesn't like snakes, because it says he ran away, but God eventually calmed Moses down enough to grab the snake by the tail and turn it back into a staff. And so right here in this part of the story, God proved to Moses that he was capable of delivering Moses from his fears and his worries and his anxieties. And yet Moses still questioned God. He was still not comfortable putting his full trust and his full faith in God, despite God delivering him from the serpent right here in the story. And I know I can speak for myself this morning. Maybe some of you feel the same way, but my life has been similar to Moses in that God has continued to deliver me from my worries day after day, and yet I still worry, I still have doubt, and I still have fear. What is important, though, is how do we respond to these thoughts that pop up into our heads? Do we listen to them? Do we feed into them? Or do we put our trust in God? We see in Exodus 4, just the following verses after what we just read, in Exodus 4, beginning in verse 18, Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. So we know Moses was not a perfect man by any means, and he still had plenty of moments following this story where he doubted and had trouble with trusting God. But despite those fears, Moses still trusted in God, and as we just read in this passage, he still went to Egypt despite his fears. Then we go through the rest of the story, and we see throughout the book of Exodus that God did exactly as he said he would, and he delivers Moses and Israel out from Egypt, just like he promised. And so having this story in mind, I'd like to fast forward to the end of Moses' leadership over Israel as he's handing over the keys to Joshua. In Deuteronomy 31:8, I have it again on the screen here. It says, this is Moses talking to Joshua. This is also what we just read in the scripture reading. But Moses says, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. So as Moses summoned Joshua, Moses knew what it took to be the leader of Israel because he had experienced it, and to trust in God at the same time. Moses knew the challenges Joshua would face as the leader, along with the doubt and fear that would take place. Moses used this opportunity in front of all the people of Israel to tell Joshua that not only is God with Joshua, but God goes before him, leading him every step of the way. When we think through Moses' path from Mount Horeb, as we just read, to this conversation, Moses had been through a lot in his life, but countless times God paved the way for Moses to be successful. Moses recognized that and wanted to encourage the same thing to Joshua. And the same is true for us today, this morning. Whether we're worried about the big things in our life, just like Moses was with being tasked with leading Israel out of Egypt, or the small things like the serpent that Moses was afraid of, the size of the worry and the anxiety and the task at hand does not matter. The common theme is that God provided for Moses, whether the challenge was big or small, and God does the same for us today. We can have confidence this week in going forward, understanding that God never leaves our side. And as if that's not encouraging enough right there, Moses reminds Joshua that God goes before us. So in our struggles and our anxieties this morning and this week, we need to remember that though each day is new for us, there's no surprises for God. And God has already seen and been through tomorrow. He's already been through Tuesday. He's already been through the rest of the week, next month, next year, next decade, and so on. And so we can have confidence today that though each day is a new experience for us, God has already been there. And there is nothing that we will experience in our life that will disrupt God's plan and his will for our lives. So the final point, I don't have the Shane image, so I had to use AI to make this one. But the final point I'd like to make today is the most significant sign that God has shown us that ultimately proves that he won this battle right here. It is the image that Shane shows every week. It's the empty tomb. This right here alone should be the reason why we should not worry, why we should not have anxiety, why we should not have any concerns about our future. The only battle that really matters in our life was won long before our existence. And Jesus defeated sin and death, and therefore now has power over both. And so with that in mind, what is there even that we should even worry about? So this week as we leave here and go on about our week, about our day and everything else, we have every reason to be confident in where we're at, even if we're not comfortable. Moses was in a spot of extreme discomfort. He looked for every excuse possible to avoid God's call to service. But what he missed was that while we as humans have limitations, God does not. Moses learned that when God helped Israel to escape Egypt, when God helped Israel to escape Egypt, because on paper it didn't seem very possible or very likely. To Moses, it looked like God was asking him to fight a losing battle where there wasn't much hope. But the reality is God never left Moses' side. God had been preparing the way for Moses long before Moses even realized. Ultimately, Moses realized this over time, and looking back at his experiences, he was able to encourage Joshua to trust in God. And the same is true for us this week. God has already won our battles this week. God has already defeated our anxieties and our fears for the week. And so we have every reason to trust in him and to be at peace internally. If there's anyone here who's struggling with anxiety or with worry or fear, first of all, just know that you're not alone. I can tell you I myself have had my own struggles with that. But also, if you're struggling with that, we would love to pray for you as a church. If there's anyone else who's struggling and would like to receive prayers from the church, this is a great opportunity to come join us up front. And if there's anyone who wants to put on Christ in baptism, we've got water right here. A great opportunity to do that as well. But if you need anything this morning, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?